Good afternoon, everybody. I'm James here with the Political Insider. We have a special guest today for our little show, Ms. Kristin Tate, a brilliant political commentator. You might have seen her on Fox News. We've run a few of her segments in our stories, and we're just really excited to have her here talking about various issues. Plenty of current events going on, things related to the president, things related to the elections in 2018. All that kind of good stuff. But we have Kristin here right now who just put out a book, her second book, I believe, How Do I Tax Thee? So welcome, Kristin. You want to talk a little bit about your book and what the topic is, or what the theme of it is?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I love the site, and I'm really excited to join you. So I'm a conservative libertarian, and I've always really been interested in fiscal issues and government spending. And, you know, when we as a nation talk about taxation, we tend to really focus on the income tax. But I wrote How Do I Tax Thee? Because I wanted to discover and expose all of the other ways that the government is draining our wallets other than income taxes.
Right.
So I did research, I did a lot of digging over a year, and I found out that income taxes actually make up less than half of our personal tax burdens.
Really? That's surprising.
Money, exactly. Of all the money you're sending off to federal, state, and local governments, less than half of that actually is in the form of income taxes. Right. So I found all of these other stealth taxes, hidden taxes that are really embedded into nearly every activity we do, every bill we pay, every purchase we make. I mean, really, every time you do anything, there are hidden taxes involved. So my book exposes all of these hidden taxes, but then also shows readers ways to avoid them and to kind of shift their spending habits to save more of their money.
Okay. What would you say is a really egregious tax that a lot of people don't know that they're paying?
So, okay, cell phone taxes. 25% of your monthly cell phone bill is taxes. And if you actually look at 25%. And if you look at the itemized line charges, this is what's really infuriating. They give these line items very important sounding names. For example, every cell phone bill and Comcast bill includes a line item called the 911 fee. Now, when you look at it, you would assume that you're paying the money towards emergency services. And you think to yourself, okay, well, I don't want to pay this fee, but it sounds like going to something important. Well, lo and behold, the fees were put in place in the late 1990s to make upgrades to the 911 calling system. The upgrades were completed in the early 2000s, and what did they do?
They kept the tax.
The 911 fees in place. Now we pay these fees, and they go directly to your state general fund where they can be spent on anything. So this is a big problem. States and cities giving taxes important sounding names so that people don't question them, when really the money is just basically going to whatever they want it to go to.
So the purpose has long been fulfilled, but they keep the tax on because nobody really knows what it is. I mean, you get your cell phone bill, right? You get most likely emailed to you. Maybe it's mailed to your home. You know, you don't really look at the charges, the itemized thing, and you just kind of pay it because everybody needs a cell phone. So that's crazy that they just let that happen.
Oh, and this is just cell phones. I mean, cable bills, electric bills, heating bills. Every time you eat at a restaurant, fly on a plane, take a train, have a drink at the bar, you go see a movie, your movie theater ticket, everything. Nearly everything is inflated in cost due to taxes.
Now, is that just like sales tax, or are there like specific taxes for these things?
No, so these are what you call hidden taxes and embedded taxes. So these are taxes that are technically classified as fees, meaning that does not need to put a formal tax up for a vote. But these fees essentially function in the same way as a tax. They drive revenue to government coffers.
Right.
But politicians love these fees because, again, it's put them up for a vote, and most constituents have no idea that they're paying them. So there's no political blowback.
Right. So you see a fee listed on your receipt or your bill or whatever, and you think it's something that the company itself is charging you extra. You don't necessarily know that the government's behind it, or they're making these companies charge it. That's a sneaky way of getting around it, that's for sure. It doesn't come across as a tax, and therefore doesn't bring any political blowback.
Oh, yeah, and some of them are really insulting, too. For example, I have 2 rescue dogs, and when you adopt a dog, you have to pay this thing in almost every state and city called a pet licensing fee.
Yeah, right,
If you pay this fee, you kind of just assume it's going to shelters or something at least dog related. But it turns out in most states, again, this is just a tax and a penalty for saving a dog, and the revenue is just sent right to the state or city coffers. Again, it's just a tax. It's penalizing people for saving homeless dogs. And if you don't pay this pet licensing fee annually, if you don't renew it, in many places, it's a punishable crime. You can go to jail for this. And in places like Seattle, they enforce this. They have pet stores sending threatening letters to their customers telling them to renew their pet licensing fees. Otherwise, it's a crime and you can actually get arrested for this. And people have. It's crazy. These are all just taxes built into our way of life.
So is it function like the business itself has to collect the tax, and if they don't collect it and send it back to the state, they basically have to harass you and get you to do it? Is that, I mean, that seems like it puts an undue burden upon, these shelters or companies or whatever. They're basically having to do the job for the job of the government for them of collecting this revenue.
That's exactly right. And so some of them are direct taxes on the consumers that companies are forced to pass down. Others are what I would call indirect taxes. So, for example, on cable companies are hit with, a plethora of taxes from state governments. They could just eat that cost, but of course that never happens. The increased costs get passed down to consumers. So that's what I would call an indirect tax, where the company does not actually have to levy the tax to the consumers, but because the company itself is getting hit with taxes, it passes the costs down to its consumers in the form of increased costs. So there are several ways that these taxes are levied, but usually they are direct.
Yeah, can you, I know you don't want to give the whole book away, but can you give maybe a few tips you provide in the book to help people get around some of these hidden taxes, to, not have to give up more money to the government for rescuing a dog?
Well, some of them, unfortunately, you just can't escape. But what's really, really interesting about these hidden and stealth taxes, as conservatives, we spend a lot of time railing against the federal government, but actually state and city governments often tax more than federal governments. And when you have, especially like a small town, levying hidden taxes, it's quite easy to undo those taxes. The problem is that constituents just don't know about them. So the first step is creating awareness of these hidden taxes, especially taxes levied at the local level. And again, sometimes if you live in a small town, like my dad lives in a town with a few thousand residents, it takes a couple people showing up at a town hall to undo some taxes, because again, they're implemented at the local level. Other ways to get around this is just shifting your spending habits. So for example, Philadelphia taxes sugary beverages. So that's soda, but also things like sports drinks. And as a result, the city has seen a steep decline in revenue, tax revenue, because consumers are going across city lines and stocking up on beverages and just bringing them back home. So what's happened there is businesses are suffering. You have large corporations that create drinks, like Coca-Cola has a headquarters there, that are having to lay off people because their sales are down and they're getting hit with these taxes. And meanwhile, you're seeing businesses outside of Philadelphia flourishing. So again, sometimes these taxes have unintended consequences for city governments that cause them to reverse the tax in the first place. Like in Boston, they tried to sneak a tax into their subway fares, and it infuriated residents so much, it created so much buzz, that after about 2 weeks, the city undid the tax. So again, a lot of this is about creating awareness so that constituents can hold their local politicians accountable. But some of it is just shifting your spending habits and voting with your feet. That sends a strong message too.
Wonderful. Well, the book sounds awesome. It's How Do I Tax Thee? You guys can check it out on Amazon or Google it or whatever. And yeah, definitely check it out. So pivoting a little bit, we'll stay a little bit on taxation, with the big Trump tax cuts. We'll talk about millennial support of Trump. Now, I don't know how much millennials care so much about huge tax cuts. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, depending on what kind of job they have or what kind of paycheck they're getting. But Kristin, you're a big fan of Trump, big vocal supporter. What would you say? What do you think for Trump? Why does he attract millennials so much more than maybe past Republican presidents, past Republican politicians? Is it tax cuts? Is it his attitude? Is it just, how he treats the opposition? Is it how he treats the Republicans? What do you think it is?
Part of it is substance and part of it's style. I think with the style, his sort of attitude and boldness really got the attention of a lot of millennials who simply were not listening in the beginning. But I actually think the biggest reason Trump has been moderately successful with millennial voters is that he's chosen, or at least during his campaign period, he chose not to focus too much on social issues. If you look at millennials, overwhelmingly, they support gay marriage. They want to legalize marijuana. They don't care about abortion. They don't want to make that illegal. So Trump really did not talk about those issues the way a lot of other traditional Republicans harp on those issues a lot. He focused more on immigration, government spending, and even bringing our troops home. He actually campaigned on a dovish foreign policy stance. So he's a very unorthodox Republican, and I think when you shift away from these sort of what some would consider outdated social platforms and focus more on the fiscal side and the spending side, and also, immigration and borders, I think that is a really winning package in terms of messaging for a younger population that tends to be a little bit more libertarian. You're not going to win any young votes by telling them, oh, we want to, increase our efforts with the drug war. We want to lock up marijuana users. We want to make gay marriage illegal again. That's not going to get Republicans anywhere. So Trump was a very different kind of Republican, and it paid dividends for him, I think, in terms of young voters. But of course, he still has a long way to go, and Hillary still beat him by shot with young voters. So Republicans have a very bigger issue that extends beyond Trump when it comes to this demographic.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, he, after he won, I think it was like 60 Minutes or something like that, they asked about gay marriage, and he said, listen, it's settled law. I'm not going to, wage war against it or stop it or anything like that. And then he recently, I think, said he was open to marijuana legalization on both state and federal levels. So, yeah, I mean, the social issues have never really been Trump's forte. He's a big tabloid star in the 80s during the heyday of that kind of thing in New York City. So definitely not his thing. Do you think a more traditional Republican like a Marco Rubio or a Jeb Bush or somebody who actually did hammer on social issues, do you think, assuming they were the general election candidate in 2016, would they have gotten as much youth support as Trump did?
Marco Rubio might have, but for different reasons. He's a phenomenal speaker. He's very, inspiring when he speaks, and that may have worked well with young voters. But if Marco Rubio had done well with young voters, I can tell you it would not be because of his stance on social issues. That would have hurt him with young voters. So I think if the Republican Party wants to do well with this younger demographic, they need to become a little bit more libertarian. And I understand that will hurt them with some of their older voters, but the times are changing, and I think we'll see an evolution of the platform of the Republican Party as the years go on.
Do you think? So so there's that. There's the basically lack of care on Trump's part of really delving into social issues, getting involved in I don't want to say not getting involved in the culture war, because I think a lot of this youth support he gets is from being involved in kind of culture war style battles. He's not raging against gay marriage, he's not raging against drug legalization. But he is getting in, immigration is kind of a cultural war battle. The whole Mueller investigation and the news narrative behind that. He's, this is like a culture war thing. He's raging against the press. He's kind of clowning on all of his opponents, giving them funny nicknames, and he's going on Twitter. I mean, he's the first Twitter president. I mean, he made just this incredible use of the platform. So you think that kind of culture war style thing is helping him with young people?
I do, and I think if anything, the left is actually helping Trump with young voters right now.
Sure, yeah.
Himself. I think the left has gone so far with this political correctness and the social justice warrior stuff that it's really alienating a lot of young people who are not firmly on the far left. There are a lot of young people who are probably more moderate in terms of their political views. Maybe they identify as left-wing, but they're not way over on the left. And when they hear stuff, that's coming from today's Democratic Party, it makes them more open to Trump. You know, when you open the New York Times every single day, and no matter what Trump does, they call him a Nazi, eventually
yes.
become noise, and it doesn't mean anything anymore. So I think the left is really losing a lot of credibility because they're consistently beating up on Trump no matter what he does. So when Trump actually does things that are bad and they call him out on it, it really doesn't hold any weight because they say he's bad every day.
Right. The boy who cried wolf kind of thing.
Right.
Where they,
exactly.
Yeah. Every time he misspeaks or says something, and they take it as this huge gaffe, or they say that it's unintended or it's something crazy.
And everyone roll their eyes after a while. And that's why I think you're seeing the ratings decline on channels like CNN, because it's so predictable.
Right.
You know, I think a lot of us, even me, I voted for Trump. I don't love everything Trump does, but I'm very open to hearing criticism of Trump when he does things that I don't like.
Right.
But I will not hear that criticism anymore from CNN because I refuse to even watch that channel because, again, they're really not fair. No matter what he does, even when he does good things, they say he's a Nazi. So it's just become ridiculous.
Yeah. It's the whole use of Nazi, the whole use of treason, that kind of thing constantly over and over again. And it's been years. I mean, this has been going on since the campaign. So we've had this kind of rhetoric for, well, I guess 3 years now, right? Since he started in the summer of 2015 with his famous elevator down the escalator, and then he did his famous speech, that it's just been constant. So yeah, it's a lot of noise. But I don't know, when I look out there and I see a lot of young kids wearing MAGA hats, and it just seems different from, you don't see that kind of support from like young people getting behind George W. Bush. You know, that's kind of this weird trite cliche thing of like getting behind him. But it's kind of like irreverent to get behind Trump because it just kind of, it's like poking people, it's just getting their goat kind of thing.
I agree with you, but I think the flip side is that the hostility towards Trump is so bad that a lot of young people are terrified to wear like a MAGA hat.
Oh, sure, for sure.
Trump, because you'll immediately be ostracized. You'll be called a racist. You'll be called a bigot. I mean, you have to be really brave today to be a Trump supporter on a college campus. Yeah,
it's true. I mean, you see what happens on college, the kind of speech suppression. They try to bring right-wing speakers to colleges like Ben Shapiro, folks like that, and they have to hire all this security, and they're like rioting and they're screaming their heads off, and it's just this bizarre thing. I would think that there's, the so-called silent majority, maybe there's a silent majority of students out there who see this kind of thing, and they don't want to raise a stink because they want to get their degree and they want to party and get out of school. They see this kind of thing and they're thinking it's absurd. There's a guy talking on stage. It's not like hurting me. He's not putting a gun to my head. He's just speaking. So why the huge fuss?
Right. No, that's exactly right. College campuses have become places of hostility. They're not open at all to ideas that question their own. My brother's in college right now. He's an engineering student at Baylor University in Texas.
Okay. Yeah.
And, he wore a MAGA hat once. He likes to sort of antagonize the left, but he just couldn't do it after that one time because people are so hostile. They take personal offense to it. They're racist and all this crazy stuff. So it's really hard for college kids.
Yeah. Well, speaking of silent majority, we got the midterms coming up, talking about Trump support and that kind of thing. The polls say Democrats could take the House. A lot of them don't say they'll take the Senate. The Republicans have a big advantage there. It's kind of a toss-up right now. Democrats just revealed, I think the House Democrats revealed their new slogan, something, of the people or something. It sounded like a trial lawyer slogan. And it's just, so what do you see happening in the fall elections? There's a lot of energy on the Democrat side. And that's typical, they're the opposition party. That's typically what happens when one party's in power, the other party gets all, crazy and they want to take back stuff. And it's kind of what we saw in 2010 when Republicans took back the House. But like you just said, it's dangerous to express Trump support. It's dangerous to go out there with a MAGA hat. It's dangerous to say that you even voted for the guy. You don't know who you're talking to. You don't know if they're going to flip their lid and take a swing at you or something like that. So what do you think is going to happen in 2018? Do you think there's more Trump support than pollsters are picking up? I mean, that's what we saw in 2016. Do you think that pollsters have changed? Do you think Democrats have an advantage? What do you see happening?
So I don't know I don't really think this is necessarily about how much support Trump has versus how much support Democrats have. This is, like it was in 2016, about mobilization.
Right.
So I believe that right now Trump still has a lot of support, but his supporters may not be as likely to actually get off the couch and go to the polls or take time off work and go to the polls as folks on the left. Folks on the left have a reason to go to the polls right now. It's always easier when you're voting for the opposition party. Now, I will say this, the Democrats won't take back the Senate. I mean, that would be extremely difficult for them. They could take back the House. I think they'll do very well. Their issue is mostly coming up with a message that really resonates. And I think the Democrats who will be most successful are the ones who will take a page from the playbook of Connor Lamb. He was that Democrat running in a heavily Trump area in Pennsylvania, and he ran sort of as a moderate. You know, he denounced Nancy Pelosi and these loons on the far left. He sort of laid out a very compelling vision for former blue dog Democrats who feel like they've been forgotten by today's Democratic Party. If the left wants to prevail again, it must swing to the middle, not the left. They need these moderates. They need hardworking folks who used to be blue dog Democrats who no longer vote Democrat, and they can get those people back. It's just a matter of shifting their message more to the center. So I don't know if they'll be successful at that, but if they are successful, I believe those are the steps they need to take, especially in purple states and in manufacturing states and these traditionally blue states that Trump won in 2016. So I don't know if they realize this, but I think that's the winning strategy for them. But I think they'll do well in the midterms. I don't know if they'll take back the House. I think it's sort of a toss-up. With Republicans, again, their big problem is just mobilization. Trump supporters, a lot of them still like Trump, but they're not as jazzed up right now because his biggest promise still hasn't been fulfilled. We don't have a wall.
We do.
Wall. And then look at government spending. Trump signed the omnibus bill, which it was the most liberal spending bill of our time. It was more liberal than anything Obama had signed. So, again, it's really going to be about how can Republicans really fire up their base right now versus Democrats kind of tweaking their message to get folks in the middle to feel welcome in their party again.
Yeah, what do you say? So, I mean, I see you on Twitter, and I see you probably follow a lot of these reporters. A lot of these guys say that, you know, so there's people out there that say Democrats have to move to the middle if they want to retake, you know, the blue wall of Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Michigan voters. But then you had the socialist woman in New York who won, you know, trounced her opponent. He was fairly liberal, but he was part of the establishment. And they say that's the key to winning, you know, the Democratic Socialist platform, the Bernie Sanders platform. What do you say to those? Do you think that's kind of like a fluke? Do you think that, you know, she won because it's Brooklyn and Queens district kind of thing that's just, you know, located there? Or do you think that Democrats will kind of latch onto that and say, well, hey, look, if she won by that big of a margin, maybe there's something to this?
I think that kind of message will work in deep blue areas of the country like New York. It will not work in the middle of the country. Again, if Democrats want to get these former blue dog Democrats, they need to be more moderate. But of course, that kind of message is going to do very well in deep, deep blue pockets of the country. So I think people will do that with success in those areas. I think part of the problem is that we're kind of talking about two factions of the Democratic Party. And the question is, how do they kind of come together and create a more national message? I think that's a question that will have to be revisited in 2020 when they have to do that. But for the midterms, I think candidates can kind of tailor their message for their specific districts and states. And that message will be very different in a place like Wisconsin than it will be in a place like New York.
Right. All politics is local kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay, so one last question. You know, hypothetically, Democrats retake the House. What kind of craziness do you think that they will push if they take the House in 2018? Because, you know, I mean, they got Maxine Waters out there screaming for impeachment and assault Trump people in public. And, you know, she's kind of like a figurehead now. She's super popular on the left. And you have the social democrat woman in New York we just mentioned. So what do you think is going to happen if they retake the House?
if they retake the House, I think impeachment proceedings will start on day one. Of course, they won't get very far because I don't think the Democrats will be able to take back the Senate. But if they get the House, they'll at least try, and it will be a symbolic movement to send a message. And you'll see a lot of resistance, a lot of Trump hatred. It's just going to be the same nonsense they're already doing. They'll just have more power in numbers now. So it'll be a lot harder for Republicans to get anything done in terms of policy. But then again, James, they really haven't gotten much done anyway. I mean, they got tax reform, which is great, but what else have they really done?
Yeah.
And Republicans have been a big disappointment to many people, especially Trump supporters. The tax reform was great, but again, that's temporary, it sunsets. And beyond that, the Congress, Republicans in Congress really haven't done much at all. Trump has done what he can himself. I mean, the Supreme Court nominations are great. The executive orders are great. But in terms of Congress, the Republicans have been a big dud.
Yeah.
Yeah, I that's activist Democrats. So I guess that's better than nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think many people on here disagree with you. It has been kind of a letdown. So, yeah, we'll see what happens in 2018. Hopefully Republicans can rally behind something and make this more of a contest rather than just Democrats screaming impeach over and over again, because that kind of gets boring. So,
well, if they do that, I can tell you it'll help Donald Trump get reelected in 2020, because that's exactly the kind of thing that fires up the right, that fires up Donald Trump's base. So the silver lining to the Democrats taking back the House is that it could actually help Donald Trump be reelected in 2020.
Just like Obama in 2010, you know, they started to get scared when Republicans took back the House. Okay, well, great. Thank you so much, Kristin Tate, for joining us. Her book, How Do I Tax Thee? You can get it on Amazon. Just check it out. It's great. A lot of great insight. But thank you again for joining us, Kristin. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
Have a good day.
Thank you.